ever found yourself suddenly overwhelmed by emotions? You're angry, you're anxious, or even panicked without fully understanding why? These moments are often triggered by hidden connections, the past experiences that can send our brain into overdrive. And in today's episode, we're diving deep into the world of emotional triggers, uncovering why they have such a powerful hold on us. And most importantly, how can you take back control? Stick around as we explore the brain's role in these intense reactions and share practical strategies to help you break the cycle of emotional reactivity for good. Whether it's sound or smell or even a place, emotional triggers can catch us off guard and often leave us feeling overwhelmed. These reactions can often feel uncontrollable, but they're not. Today we're going to break down what emotional triggers are, how they're tied to past trauma, and most importantly, how you can recognize and manage them. We're also going to take a look at the brain's role in these reactions and provide tools that you can use to take back control. So if you're ready to stop letting emotional triggers dictate your day and start gaining mastery over them, well, this episode's for you. So let's dive in. Welcome to Shields Down, Healing for First Responders, the podcast dedicated to supporting and empowering those who serve on the front lines as they navigate the challenges of PTSD and trauma. Each episode, we shine a light on the emotional realities faced by first responders. Together, we'll explore stories of resilience, gain insights from mental health professionals, and uncover practical tools to guide recovery and growth. So whether you're a first responder facing PTSD or someone who supports them, Shields Down offers connection, hope, and a path forward. So let's take the first step together. Put your shield down, reclaim your strength, and remember, you're not alone. Tune in and let the healing begin. The main thing that you need to do is to understand what emotional triggers are, right? Emotional triggers are internal or they're external cues that provoke strong emotional reactions, and they're often unexpected, right? These triggers can be specific memories. They can be situations or stimuli like a certain smell, sound, or even a location that recall a past experience. Now, for some individuals who have experienced trauma, emotional triggers are often connected to those memories, and they cause an intense emotional response, such as fear, anger, sadness, or even anxiety. For example, let's say you hear a loud noise, and it might remind someone of like a distressing event, causing an automatic emotional reaction. Triggers can vary widely between you, between me, between your partner, people around you. But the common thread is that their power to elicit deep emotional responses, right? So regardless of what the trigger is, it's setting off an emotional response in your mind, right? And they can often are linked to past traumatic events because the brain tends to associate specific stimuli with their original trauma. So you hear something, you smell something, like, man, there are some days still, like I've been out of the funeral home business for, I'd say, at least 15 years. And there are still days that I'll have a smell and it'll remind me of maybe someone's loved one that I've worked on. And not to say that's a bad thing, but it brings up these emotions of what I went through. And I'm like, yeah, I went through something like that. So it can be something small like that. You can hear a voice. You know, I oftentimes have heard someone say the name Lucas, which is my son that passed away. I've often heard people say, hey, Lucas, come here. And I'd look. And I'd have that emotion because it's a sound that has kind of caught me off guard. Right? When a person encounters something that reminds them of trauma, right, you're going to respond as though the threat is happening again. So if you're as a first responder, let's go, for example, on this one, we're going to do a firefighter. So a firefighter has gone into a burning building and he hears someone screaming for help. And again, if this sets you off, turn it off. I don't want to bring up any emotions for anybody during these episodes. And now they're at a park and a little kid is yelling for their mom because they've fallen off a swing and they hear the word help. And this can really set the tone because it's responding like the threat's happening again. And it can put people in that panic state. Right? It causes just these automatic emotional reactions. Right? The anxiety, the anger, the avoidance. Just from hearing simple triggers. So these reactions are often, right, very typically involuntary. You don't choose them. You're like, okay, I'm going to start crying now, or I'm going to start getting mad because of something that set me off that has nothing to do with the situation I'm in, right? The body's survival instincts just activate because they protect you from perceived harm, right? Even if the current situation poses no real threat. That's where the fight, flight, or freeze comes in. Because you remember what could have happened, or maybe what did happen in your past. You're like, oh, I got to get out of here. Right? That's why people go into these situations and maybe they're fearful of going out into the world. But instead, because of the triggers they have, they hibernate in a house and they can't go out because they're fearful of being triggered. But when you learn about emotional triggers and you learn to identify them and know, okay, well, if I hear this noise, it's going to trigger me to do this, right? Or if I hear this word, it's going to trigger me to do this, right? If you can identify that, it's the first step. It's the crucial first step towards breaking that cycle of emotional reactivity, because it's going to bring the awareness to the root cause of intense emotions. And that's why I talk a lot about paying attention and knowing why things happen the way they do. Now, when individuals recognize what sets them off, what specific stimuli are provoking their reactions, you can begin to address it and manage it instead of being caught off guard, right? I know personally that when I hear the word Lucas, or I hear, certain noises, or I go to hospitals, I know it's going to trigger me. And I've used some of these stressors, some of the exercises I've given you to overcome that trigger. Right? But you got to understand that triggers kind of helps you create that space between stimulus and that emotional response, right? So you can remember, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to be triggered, so now I need to understand what I do in between being triggered and my emotional response. And then you thoughtfully react rather than automatically, like anger, anxiety, or any other avoidance emotions that you may feel. I know that it's like, okay, here's what I do. Here's one example of what I do. So when I'm in the let's say I have to take one of my current children to the hospital. I know I get triggered at hospitals because we spent so much time there with Lucas. What I do is I put some gratitude in there. So on my way to the hospital, I say, hey, look, I'm grateful for the nurses. I'm grateful for the experience I had with Lucas at the hospital because they were so good. I feel happy that we have this opportunity to go to the hospital. And it's like, I just try to put a lot of gratitude and happiness into the experience that I'm doing, and it really minimizes the triggers that I have. Now, luckily, my kids don't go to the hospital often, and knock on wood, I trust that it's going to stay that way. But when you identify your triggers in your life, you can really begin to develop these coping strategies. But my friends, you have to know what's triggering you. You have to pay attention of, oh my gosh, I'm being triggered, or why do I feel like that? Why am I getting angry? What's a trigger? What's setting you off to get you angry? But you have to pay attention to that. Because the role of the brain, okay, we're going to dive a little bit into some science here and how the brain triggers responses. So the brain processes emotional triggers, particularly the amygdala, its role is signaling those threats, right? And they activate that fight, flight, or response. So the brain processes emotional triggers through a network that involves several key areas like the amygdala, which plays the biggest crucial role, right? It offers the brain's fear center, right? That's often what it's known. So what it does is it's responsible for detecting threats and activating your response, right? So when you think, oh my gosh, I gotta get out of here, or when you're driving down the road and the person in front of you slams on their brakes and you have to respond, that's your amygdala. It's triggering that fight, flight response, right? So when you have an emotional trigger that's encountered because of a trigger that's gone off, especially one that's linked to your trauma, the amygdala quickly signals that there's danger, even if there's nothing there, even if there's no threat, and says, I got to get out of here, I got to protect myself. And that's just the role the brain has created, because what our mind does is it protects us, right? It doesn't like feeling the way it felt. So it's going to do anything it can to move you away from that feeling again. So this can cause those intense emotions when you're not, right? You can get increased heart rate. You can start shallow breathing. These are kind of responses to that fear, to that anxiety, right? But it's there to protect us. So don't feel that something's wrong, something's going on when you have one of these feelings. It's just your body protecting you. And the way it protects you is through these automatic behaviors, right? The amygdala's role in this process means that even when the rational part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, knows, it's like, I know there's nothing going on. I know there's no danger right now. But the body starts reacting strongly due to that deep emotional memory stored in the amygdala. That's why identifying and managing these triggers is crucial for calming this automatic response. Right? We're going to have emotional responses, and they can feel so overwhelming, right? Because our brain is hardwired to prioritize survival over rational thought. And when the brain perceives a threat, especially through emotional triggers, it activates the amygdala, that fight flight, right? So then the survival mechanism floods the body with stress hormones like adrenaline or cortisol, preparing to, it's like, okay, we're going to go, we're going to run, we're going to take off. I need to protect myself. And then because you're doing that, the prefrontal cortex, which again is a part that is responsible for rational thinking, decision making, and emotional regulation, it just takes back seat, right? Number one thing we're trying to do is always protect ourselves first. So then as a result of this, the brain focuses solely on survival. So we react with fear, anxiety, we get mad, we feel overwhelmed, out of control. And this intense focus on survival is going to override that ability to think clearly, that ability to reason through the situation or calm down, leading to an impulsive reaction or an emotional outburst. And then when you understand this is a natural brain response, it's going to help you understand that emotional triggers can cause such strong reactions. And then why I keep doing this and keep teaching you that when you can learn to regulate them, you're gonna create that long-term emotional balance, right? When you build emotional awareness and practice mindfulness, and the stuff I keep kind of giving you guys to do, this can significantly help in regulating automatic emotional response, right? Over time, obviously, it's not something that you got to work at this. And emotional awareness involves recognizing and understanding your feelings in the moment. You have to basically know why you're feeling what you're feeling. And then that gets into identifying your emotional triggers, but before they lead to overwhelming reactions. So when you become more aware of your emotions and the patterns and how certain triggers or what triggers you, you can start to consciously interrupt that automatic response that would normally take over. When you practice mindfulness, right, this strengthens this process by training the brain to stay present. Because when you're fearful of something, when you have these emotional responses, it's either to a past or a future event. It's not actually in this moment. And if it is, well, then your amygdala is doing its job and it's responding appropriately. So when you practice mindfulness, bring yourself in the moment You're observing your thoughts. You're observing your feelings, your body sensations without immediately reacting to them. And over time, this is going to rewire the brain to become less reactive to that emotional trigger because it's reducing the amygdala's overactivity and strengthening that prefrontal cortex role in rational thinking and emotional regulation. And that's what mindfulness does. It helps us slow down that fight or flight response. And it's going to allow you to respond to those challenges with greater calm and clarity instead of being overwhelmed by these emotions. So you want to develop these emotional regulating strategies, right? Create personal trigger action plans. I've talked a lot about trigger action plans because it's essential for managing these emotional triggers effectively. It's essential for preventing them from spiraling and getting you overwhelmed with these emotional responses. When you've created that trigger action plan for yourself, it's going to help, right? You're going to know how to recognize early warning signs. You're going to know how to engage in these calming practices. You're going to know when it's valuable for you to seek the support, right? You get to a part in your action plan and it's like, okay, well, I'm trying to recognize, I understand that I'm being triggered from this situation. I'm trying to do this tactical breathing or these grounding techniques and it's just not working for this at this time. So you have in your tactical action plan, or your trigger action plan, that you're going to seek support now, right? Reaching out to that trusted friend, the therapist, the support group, anything. And when you create and consistently use these personal trigger action plans for yourself, you're going to reduce that powerful trigger emotion, right? And you're going to regain control over your life, over your responses, and you're going to foster that long-term emotional healing that we're going for, right? But you have to learn that breaking the cycle takes consistent practice, and it takes patience. But trust me, my friends, emotional triggers can become less overwhelming with time. I've had to deal with it. I know I've spent over a decade trying to deal with these emotional triggers, and I've learned these. And that's why I want to show them to you. When you can begin to break the cycle of emotional reactivity, you got to do it over time, over and over again. It's like when a child first learns his name, you have to tell them over and over again. You have to call them by their name, and this creates those neurons within the mind, and then that creates that feeling and the understanding, oh, this is my name. And then they respond to it. That's their mindset response to it. So once you regularly engage in these activities, like emotional awareness, mindfulness, calming techniques, right? You're going to gradually retain that brain to respond differently to those triggers. And each time you are successful and you're like, yeah, you know what? I recognize that trigger. I respond to it. It's going to create that new neural pathway, and it's going to support your emotional regulation. It's great, my friends. It's something that's so uplifting when you're like, yeah, I did this. I feel great now that I did this. So what we're going to do, like for our exercise today, is to, again, create that emotional trigger mapping exercise. And I'll put a little PDF because I know it's better to I always say, get it out of your head, get it on the paper. So on the worksheet, you're going to have, I want you to identify your top 3 emotions, right? The top 3 things that you believe trigger you. So, for each of them, write down these 3 questions. What specific event or situation tends to trigger that reaction? And then secondly, what emotions arise when you are triggered? And then how do you feel? What physical sensations or thought accompany these emotions? So what event, what emotions you have, and how do you feel? And then after you identify these aspects, right, you want to develop a strategy for managing each trigger, whether it's a breathing technique, grounding exercise, or reframing. And then you want to practice them over the next week or 2, and then journal any changes that you have and how you responded to the trigger and how it made you feel and how it's working or not working. Change the situation and make it work for you. That's it. That's it for today's episode. Right? I appreciate you. I dove deep into emotional triggers today. What they are, how they're connected to your past trauma, how they impact that they can have on our emotional and physical responses. And more importantly, I explored how awareness and mindfulness can really help you recognize these triggers and regain control, right? I talked about the importance of creating that personal trigger action plan. Remember, breaking the cycle of emotional reactivity takes practice and patience. Over time, triggers will lose their power and you'll gain the resilience you need to thrive. And of course, if today's episode resonated with you, take some time to reflect on your own emotional triggers. Start to put some of these into practices. Progress is possible. And you don't have to do it alone. Reach out to that support network when needed. Share this to people that you think might benefit from this. Subscribe to it, please. Leave a review. Ask a question. I'm here for you. Whatever you need, reach out. Thank you for tuning in to Shields Down, Healing for First Responders. Remember, healing is a journey, and each step forward matters. Now, if today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories, insights, and tools for recovery. Together, we'll build a stronger, more resilient community. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and we'll see you on the next episode.